is 5:33, and I'd like to bring the City Creeks Advisory Committee meeting on April 17th to order. Can we have roll call? Mr. McIntosh?
Here.
Ms. French?
Here.
Ms. Lomas?
Here.
Ms. Weber?
Here.
Mr. Moldaver? And Mr. Bullock. Thank you. Thank you. So our first item here is just approval of the minutes from our February 20th meeting.
Move to accept the draft minutes of the February meeting as submitted.
Can we get a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain.
Abstain too.
Thank you. And how about, are there any meeting adjustments, Cameron?
No adjustments, but I do have one announcement. I passed out to all of the committee members the recently adopted guidelines for City of Santa Barbara advisory groups, and wanted to let you all know that there is a City of Santa Barbara Advisory Group workshop scheduled for Wednesday, May 8th. It's from 4:30 to 6 p.m. at Faulkner Gallery, which is at the main library. And there will be a ethics training as part of that workshop. And for this committee, as well as many other committees within this and commissions within the city, that the ethics training is a mandatory training. So it's a mandatory requirement. So this is an opportunity to do that. I think there's going to be some other opportunities. There may be an online training opportunity also. But Wednesday, May 8th, 4:30 to 6 at Faulkner Gallery is the first one that's come up. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to address the committee for a couple minutes? No. All right. How about any committee member and staff communications? All right.
Madam Chair, just wanted to say we did have a second budget subcommittee meeting between the last meeting of the full committee and this one. That was March 18th, and we'll talk about that a little more when we get to the budget item.
Madam Chair, since it's always really, really exciting when we have students who are more interested in watersheds and creeks, I was wondering if someone in the audience might come up and tell us what school or program you're connected to, whether you want to make any comments or not, because I'm always very glad to see the next generation of community leaders attending committee meetings. No, just
Hi all. My name's Nico. My name's Nico Galindo. I'm with Santa Barbara City College Environmental Studies 101 with those three. And for one of our assignments, we have to go to a public meeting, something that addresses the issue of sustainability and just something to do with environmental, whatever. And so yeah, I came to this one. But I'm actually really interested in this stuff, so I'm glad to be here.
Madam Chair, are you guys in Adam Green's class? Oh, a living god of environmental education. I'd also be remiss in not pointing out to you that one of our best and most experienced members of the City Council, our liaison, Frank Hotchkiss, is actually in the same row as you. So if you have any questions about the process before or after the meeting, there's no better person who can explain how local government works than a member of our City Council.
Thank you, Lee. We're going to move on here to our first business item, a presentation from Tim Burgess on stormwater infiltration.
Good evening, everybody.
Thanks for coming. My name is Tim Burgess. I'm a water resources specialist for the City Creeks Division. And I'm here to talk about, did you click it? Okay. I'm here to talk about stormwater infiltration demonstration projects. As you all are probably well aware, stormwater and urban runoff from impervious surfaces such as roadways and parking lots are a major source of water quality pollution in the creeks and the ocean. The pollution that comes off these parking lots include bacteria, metals, hydrocarbons such as oils, sediment. All these things are really toxic to aquatic life and potentially harmful to human health. So a high percentage of Santa Barbara's surface area is impermeable. And as a result of this, when rain falls, it flows directly off the surfaces, carries these pollutants through the storm drains directly to the creeks without any slowing down. And so in addition to carrying these pollutants into the creeks, affecting wildlife and aquatic resources, the fast flows that result from this runoff tend to degrade habitat and further degrade creeks. To address these problems, the city has designed stormwater infiltration projects. And these projects are designed to capture and treat this stormwater runoff right at the source so that the water can be infiltrated and passively treats hydrocarbons, the sediment and the bacteria, and keeps it out of the creeks. Additional benefits from these projects is that they recharge groundwater, and in some cases they can reduce local flooding. And when implemented throughout the city, they can really reduce citywide flooding. In September 2011, the Creeks Advisory Committee visited the Mackenzie Park Stormwater Infiltration Project, and that project consists of permeable pavers and asphalt, a mixture of the two. The roadways on the Mackenzie Park project were repaved with asphalt. Well, first of all of the asphalt from the parking lot was removed. New asphalt was placed in the roadways, and in the parking stalls, were replaced with permeable pavers. And these were put here to direct the water that flows off the parking lot is directed into these using the natural grade of the parking lot, and in some cases helped with some surface berms to direct the water into them. This project, if you looked under the surface of this project, under the permeable pavers, there's a sub surface that goes deep in some cases, up to 3.5 feet deep. And below the pavers, the rainwater falls, goes through the gaps, through a bedding layer of rock into an area of a basin that's filled with big rocks without any sand in between, that serves as a sort of a reservoir until the water can fully infiltrate into the native soil down below. And this is all detained by these concrete edge restraints that go from the surface all the way down to the bottom to keep the water from going out the side and help it infiltrate into the soil. These are some photos of the Mackenzie Park parking lot before and after. On the left is before, right here, all asphalt, and after, right here. We also planted some more trees and made new tree islands in that project. In October 2012, the Creeks Division was awarded a grant from the Proposition 84 Stormwater Grant Program. The grant amount was $1.889 million, and it was to construct stormwater infiltration demonstration projects. The sites of these projects are Oak Park, and Oak Park actually has 3 sub-sites: the main parking lot, the stage area, the main picnic area, and the tennis court parking lot. And then also we are going to construct these projects at Westside Neighborhood Center parking lot and the Stevens Park parking lot. And as I said, we received the grant to treat water and urban runoff through infiltration. So just a little about the design of these projects. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say that the Creeks Division collaborated with the Engineering Division for these projects to design them and construct them. The collaboration was very successful in the Mackenzie Park project, and it continued into these new projects. And the success of the Mackenzie Park project, and then with these new projects, has really given the city great expertise in designing stormwater infiltration projects. So for the design of these projects at Oak Park, Stevens, and Westside Neighborhood Center, about 100,000 square feet of asphalt is going to be removed. In place of that, on 85,000 square feet of that will be permeable pavers. The additional 15,000 square feet remaining will be covered with native vegetation, native soil, and mulch in some cases. Swing gates will be installed at Stevens Park. Stevens Park has a chain across it right now. We're going to put a swing gate in there, and the Oak Park tennis court lot will have a swing gate at the entrance. New picnic tables will be installed at the Oak Park picnic area, and bike parking will be added at the Oak Park picnic area, main picnic area, and Stevens Park. So I'm going to go through the plans really quickly, just some basic design elements of all of these sites. And all these sites, you'll see the gray area is where there is existing pavement. This is the 3 Oak Park sites. Right here is just to orient you, this is the horseshoe pit, this is the stage, this is Mission Creek running through, and on the other side of the creek is the picnic area. Picnic tables right here, playground, bathrooms. So the gray area, as I said, will be removed. All the asphalt will be removed, replaced with permeable pavers in this area, except in a couple spots right here, such as this one, where native plants and landscaping will be placed right here. And then on this side, the picnic area, pretty straightforward. The tennis court parking lot up off Talent Road. This is Talent Road right here. This is the entrance. The asphalt will be removed. This area right here is where the permeable pavers will be placed. This area over here will be left unpaved, and native plants will be put here and some mulch area over here. The Westside Neighborhood Center. This is a portion of the Westside Neighborhood Center parking lot. The Westside Neighborhood Center building is right here. Mission Creek runs right here. And this is in between. This is pretty basic. All of it will be replaced with permeable pavers. These are a couple tree islands right here. This is the Stevens Park plans. This is Cannon Drive right here. As you drive into Stevens Park, this is a steep little section of driveway right here that will actually be, the asphalt will be removed and be replaced with concrete. And the water from that concrete will be directed to a swale that flows to San Roque Creek. The rest of the parking lot that extends down as you drive down will all be permeable pavers. Down here is a continuation of up here, all the way to the playground and the field. Bike parking goes up here. So, to give you an idea of the timeline for this, the City Council approved the construction contract with G. Sosa Construction Incorporated on March 19th. The plan is to construct between May 1st and October 31st. And that's going to be done in 2 phases. The Stevens Park, Oak Park Tennis Court, and the Westside Neighborhood Center will be done between May 1st and July 31st. And then the Oak Park main lot, stage, and picnic area will be done from June 1st to July 31st. Let's see. Lost a slide. Well, I happen to bring a paper copy, so I do have a backup in case this doesn't last. I'm sorry, August 1st to October 31st for the main parking lot, for the Oak Park sections. Okay, so for the budget, the estimated cost to construct the upcoming stormwater infiltration projects is going to be $2,361,624. Let me just jump right to those. There we go. Okay, so as I said before, the Creeks Division received a $1.889 million grant from the State Water Resources Control Board through Prop 84 Stormwater Grant Program, and the balance, the difference between the two, will come from the Creeks Division Capital Fund. And with that, that concludes the presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great presentation, Mr. Burgess. Thank you. I'm familiar with all the parks, and I noticed a tremendous improvement in the before and after at Mackenzie Park. In terms of the budget, the handout that we had as recently as last week said that the estimated cost is 2.227, and you listed it now as 2.3. Were there things that were left out, or were you just rounding it up?
I believe that comes from. I pulled this extra information just from the council agenda report, and this extra money, I believe, comes from the. Let me check here. Yeah, the change order fund that they put in.
Yeah.
10%. Huh? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I believe that comes from change order funds that they put in. So,
Okay,
so the actual cost is that, and it may they put in a contingency there just in case it goes up.
So that means the budget is still $2,227,000, but the council, when they approved it up to 2.3 in case during the course of the several projects there's a need by the contractor that's approved by the city to make improvements that weren't listed in the initial budget.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very
Yeah.
much. That explains it.
Madam Chair, I was wondering if you could explain a little more on the detail, just at the entrance of Stevens Park. You had said something about how that's going to be a little different
Yeah.
as opposed to the rest of the lot, and I kind of missed that.
Yeah. Okay. No, I don't believe so. The entrance to Stevens Park is a really steep grade. Kind of drops down from Cannon Drive into the parking lot. So it's not really feasible to make that a permeable paver area. In order to get in the permeable paver basins have a flat level subgrade to allow the water to spread out and infiltrate. On a steep surface like that, in order to get it flat and store the proper amount of water, you would have to go down really deep on the uphill end. So what we did here was it's asphalt right now. We replaced that with concrete, and we're going to place a berm right there that directs this little bit of water that rains on here to a swale that's actually existing. We're going to improve it, but it doesn't need much improvement. We're not going to do any heavy grading in there. Just kind of augment it with some rock to stabilize it. And so it will flow into that swale, which I think it's about 150 feet to San Roque Creek.
Thank you.
Sure.
What will the interface be between the concrete and the permeable pavers at that point? Will it have some kind of channelization to direct the water out to the berm, or so that you didn't pass it on?
Before the interface, there's going to be a berm, just kind of right before, right about there. I'm not sure why it doesn't show it right here, but it's there.
It's a.
Speed bump?
I think they would call them speed humps because it's broader than that, so it's not going to be a big bump because it is going to be at an angle, as you can see there, and so to not create something that's difficult to drive over, it's pretty gradual, and it's just to direct that little bit of flow. All the water up on the street is all the street's graded back the other direction, so it's just that small area at the top of the parking lot that's being drained there.
And after that, the interface between the actual concrete and the pavers will be like this diagram, except so the pavers on the left with the basin in here. This edge restraint goes all the way down to the bottom of the basin, and if it's concrete on here, you'll see native soil up to about here, and then the subgrade for the concrete, and then a concrete layer right there. Sure.
Any further questions? Yeah, Paul.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So when the projects are complete, what department will be responsible for maintenance and upkeep as pavers crack or that starts to settle? What's the idea there?
Well, currently the Public Works Department Facilities Division takes care of the maintenance of the asphalt and any kind of re-asphalting, slurry sealing. And so within the contract period of any kind of warranty, we will get the contractor back in there to repair anything. But beyond that, we will be purchasing extra pavers, a pallet or two. We actually even have some extra from Mackenzie Park, and those will be used by the Facilities Division to do any kind of repairs long term. Any kind of any maintenance beyond what Parks currently does. Parks goes in and vacuums the parking lots. Anything that comes up unexpectedly, Creeks Division may take care of that. We don't expect anything. We don't expect too much.
I just wanted to see if any members of the public wanted to really impress their professor and either ask a question or make a comment on this project, because public input is usually welcome. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you have a question, it would be great. But you have to come up to the mic.
My name's Heather, and am I doing it
It's
right?
on.
Okay. All right. My name's Heather, and I actually had a question about, is there any, sorry, let me back my thought. Is there any, common damage that would come about with this? Like you were saying about how you have extra material to replace if needed, but is there any common damages that would happen frequently, or any downsides to this, like the material you're using particularly?
Yeah, that's a good question. We keep extra pavers, and the Facilities Division requested us getting extra pavers because, like a lot of paved surfaces, there's utilities that run underneath, and occasionally those utilities, like pipes, sewer pipes, water pipes, need servicing, or they break. Things happen unexpectedly. And so in order to be able to gain access to those, the pavers would have to be pulled up. Sometimes pavers would get broken. These pavers are rated to be very strong. I think it's 80,000 pounds per square foot. They're strong as any concrete. So we haven't really seen a whole lot of damage at Mackenzie Park, and even with the Fiesta trucks that drive through there. But it's kind of a just in case, and for maintenance, things like that. If they have to unzip the things and get down in there, and then put them back, maybe you don't have all the pavers that fit to right. You have an extra pallet. So does that answer your question? Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Well, this looks like a great plan, and it's obviously been successful. So, what do you think about plans in the future infrastructure, about Santa Barbara and maybe other towns doing this, other places, before setting in impermeable asphalt? Do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I mentioned this, but water quality degradation is just directly correlated with the increase in impervious surface. And so, in a place like Santa Barbara, where we're pretty built out already, we've got a lot of impervious surface that, in reality, these paved surfaces aren't going to go away. And so this provides a great solution to that, where you can effectively restore the natural hydrology of a site and then keep the existing use. And so going forward in any new projects, the city has the stormwater management program, and so any projects that trigger certain things have to comply with this stormwater management programs and one of the requirements. And one of those requirements is to treat a 1 inch of rain in a 24-hour storm event. 1 inch in 24-hour storm event. And so a lot of these things are being implemented through this requirement. But yes, it's a great retrofit for existing infrastructure for all cities, everywhere. I think it's a great solution. Sure. You have another question? Okay.
So if this was taken to other cities, in the primary choice over asphalt, is that much of a price difference for their budget?
Okay, so we did a cost analysis for this type of paving and compared it to concrete, compared it to asphalt. It is similar to asphalt is cheaper up front. Asphalt and however, asphalt requires so asphalt will last about 25 to 30 years, and in that 25 to 30 years, the city goes through and re-slurries that and kind of puts a slurry layer on top to lengthen the life to the 25, 30 years. And so when you consider the slurrying, it lasting 25 to 30 years, these concrete pavers, like concrete, are designed to last 50 to 60 years. And so these cost more up front. However, when you compare the cost of the asphalt, basically asphalting, slurrying for 25, 30 years, then re-asphalting up to that 60 years and then slurrying, it breaks about even. However, one thing that doesn't take into account is that these permeable pavers, while they're meeting the structural requirement and the functional requirement, they also meet the stormwater requirement, and asphalt doesn't. And so moving forward with our stormwater management program requirements, in addition to paving with asphalt, any kind of building, any kind of construction would have to also put in a stormwater element to treat that. And so that would raise the cost on site of that, however they would do it, through swales, underground basins, things like that. And so that's the cost analysis. It's about a break even, but we have an additional benefit with this.
Any further questions from the public? Go ahead, please.
Hi, Frank Hotchkiss. Will this necessitate the closing of any of these facilities for any extended period of time?
That's a good question. Yes, it will. The parking lots will be closed for the duration of the construction of these parking lots. And so, I'm sorry, but the parking lots will be closed, but the facilities will all be open. Westside Neighborhood Center will be open. Stevens Park will actually be open, though the access, you will not be able to gain access through the parking lot. Oak Park will be open. The Oak Park playground, while they're constructing around those paths, will have to be closed. And we're going to work with the contractor to see how we can keep that open for as long as possible. The Oak Park pool will be open. The Oak Park bathrooms right there that are surrounded by the pavement will not be open, at least for a portion of the project. But for the most part, the facilities will be open. But the parking lots will not be able to be parked on.
Madam Chair, if I may, just one other question. With the one parking lot that we've done, I believe it's just Mackenzie. Do you have any data? Was there any sort of monitoring or performance data you got from that parking lot for the very few storm events that we actually had this winter?
Yeah, we actually, for the Mackenzie Park parking lot, we installed 2 monitoring wells so that we could monitor the water level in the parking lot. And so these wells go all the way down to the subgrade here, and so it's a well from the surface all the way down here. So when the water fills up, we can measure that. We can measure it manually. We also bought a data logger that we can drop in there that logs the water level every 10 minutes or so. And so we have done that to measure the effectiveness of, how fast the water infiltrates down, to make sure that we don't have a pond under there. And it looks great. It looks good. And so another thing that we've done, we did for Mackenzie, we did like we do with all of our projects, we do pre-project storm monitoring. We measured runoff. We took samples of the runoff, sent them off to the lab to test for metals, hydrocarbons, bacteria, things like that. And we've done that for this, and that's actually a requirement of the grant that we got for this project. And so there weren't many storms to choose from this past winter, but we were able to sample 3 different storms and send these off to the constituents off to the lab. And we tested positive for hydrocarbons on all of them. Metals, we got metals. We got metals that are toxic: chromium, copper, lead, and zinc. We also do toxicity tests, and in some of the samples we had as low as like 10% survival. For toxicity tests is where they take the water, put fish in it, and check the survival rate. And that's a good way to kind of, sometimes one pollutant isn't necessarily, you can't identify necessarily what is going on, but it's toxic. So that's the...
I just had, Mr. Burgess mentioned one of the other side benefits is localized flood control. And I think he had an extra picture here that shows what kind of things were happening in Mackenzie Park during just your standard rain event. A 1-inch of rain could cause a big puddle like that to form around the drop inlet, and we'd have flooding. And if you go there now, even during the rain, you don't see surface flow across the parking lot at all. It just drops down into the basins underneath the pavers.
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Tim.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to our next item here, which is a presentation from Cameron Benson on the budget for the fiscal year 2014-2015.
Okay, just hand me that. Okay, good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. This evening I'm going to be presenting the proposed fiscal year 2014-2015 budgets for the Creeks Division. I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about the budget process. For those of you who have been through this before, the city operates on a 2-year budget cycle, and tonight we're going to be reviewing the entire 2-year plan for the Creeks Division for both fiscal year 14 and 15. Although I'm going to focus primarily on FY14 because we'll be back here next year looking again at 2015. So we have a budget subcommittee of this committee that is our chair and our vice chair and our immediate past chair. The subcommittee has met 2 times to go over the proposed budget. We met on February 13th and again on March 18th. We're here tonight going through the budget with the full committee. And next Wednesday, we'll be at the Parks and Recreation Commission and then to the City Council. Yesterday, the City Council heard the entire city budget. We'll be presenting the Creeks Division budget to the City Council as part of the Parks and Recreation Department budget on May 15th. And then the Council has its deliberations and decision-making in the first half of June. All of these meetings have been and will continue to be publicly noticed and open to the public. Okay, as you know, most of the funding from the Creeks Division comes from the voter-approved Measure B, which was a 2% increase in the transient occupancy tax or hotel bed tax. It's placed into a special fund that is restricted to pay for stormwater and surface water quality improvement and creek restoration projects. the Creeks Division receives no funding from the general fund. And the budget we're proposing is consistent with Measure B as well as the Creeks program funding guidelines, which were reaffirmed by this committee back in January of 2010. I'm going to move on to the numbers, and I'll start with our revenue. Our fiscal year 2014 TOT revenue projection, which comes from the city's finance department, are up by $392,000, which is almost a 12% increase from the adopted fiscal year 13 budget. The finance department further forecasts a 3.5% increase in FY15 from the FY14 numbers. And as with the past few years' budget, and as we discussed at our capital improvement program meeting back in October and during our budget subcommittee meetings February or March, we're proposing to transfer funds from our Creeks Creeks Fund reserve to balance this year's budget. And that's because, as you can see, our proposed revenues are not going to match up with our proposed expenditures, and that's largely because we've increased our funding of our capital program over the last few years. So on the expenditure side, the proposed FY14 and 15 budgets are substantially similar to the FY13 budget. There are a few notable exceptions that I wanted to mention. First, the proposed FY14 and 15 budgets include an increase in funding for the capital program. In FY13, as you can see down here near the bottom, we had a transfer to our capital program of $1,325,000. We're proposing to increase that by $350,000 in FY14 and then to $1.475 million in FY15. The other major difference is the addition of a new city overhead allocated cost of $181,000. And this is a single line item that will appear in the Creeks Division budget for FY14 and 15. And what that is an allocated cost that pays for city services that are utilized by the Creeks Division throughout the year. For example, the city attorney, the finance department, the city administrator, human resources, mayor and council, and the city clerk's office. And also, on the expenditure side, I'm proposing to reduce professional services costs and other operational costs by approximately $150,000 in FY14 and 15 to reflect anticipated program changes. So this chart breaks our expenditures down into our three main program areas. Whoops. Oh, I'm sorry. It breaks our expenditures down as different line items as a percentage of our overall budget. And as you can see, at 41%, our capital improvement program is the largest single line item in our budget, followed by staff salaries and benefits and supplies and professional services. And as we've done in the past, we want to break our budget down into our major program areas. And for the Creeks Division, our major program areas are water quality improvement, creek restoration, and community outreach. And this is how our proposed FY14 budget breaks down by program areas. One thing to note here is if we're just looking at our operational costs, this is our breakdown. Roughly 50% of the money goes to water quality improvement, 25% to creek restoration, 25% to community outreach. When we add in our capital spending, it changes those percentages quite dramatically, but that fluctuates quite a bit from year to year. And so the reason creek restoration looks so high is we have a lot of funding going into creek restoration programs through our capital program this year. And here's same information just presented in a pie chart as compared to the table. But again, you can see how much the capital program makes up of the spending. So this dark green is the capital program, creek restoration, compared to just ongoing operational programs for creek restoration. and similar for water quality. So the main highlights for our proposed FY 2014 budget are first, as I noted earlier, the Finance Department is forecasting a fairly significant increase in Measure B revenues. Those will be partially offset by a reduction in the forecasted interest revenue that we expect to receive next year. And second, our capital improvement program has a significant increase over last year, $350,000. A couple of different program changes. Our invasive plant removal program, we're looking at a $40,000 decrease from FY13 funding, and the reason for that is that was a fairly new program. We were trying to gauge how much we'd be able to do in a given year. We had estimated that cost to be of $80,000, and it turned out that that's high. So we expect the cost over the next 2 years to be $60,000 a year each year for the next 2 years. Next year in FY14, we anticipate receiving a $20,000 grant from the County Agricultural Commissioner's Office, which will pay for that. So we see a $40,000 decrease in that program for next year. Similarly, with the Creek Tree program, which is a fairly new program where we work with private property owners who own the property along the creeks who want to put in native riparian trees on their property and care for them. We started that program out with, I think, a $50,000 budget, and that was probably overly optimistic, not because the program's not popular, but the program's very labor intensive to get out and talk to creekside property owners. So what we do to sort of reduce the cost of our program and be able to make a lot of contacts is we work with interns, and they're out making the initial contacts, and then once we have somebody who's interested, we'll go out and work with them to choose the type of tree species they want on their property and get them planted and set up with irrigation and so forth. So anyway, we're just setting that new number at something that we think is more realistic based on the past couple of years. And then as we have done the last few years, we have a transfer from our reserves into our capital budget this year of almost $725,000, which will balance the budget. I'll talk a little bit more about the reserve in a minute. We're proposing to continue with our water quality monitoring and research over the next 2 years at just slightly reduced funding levels compared to FY13. Several other continuing programs, creek cleanups and waste management, youth programs, all these various outreach programs are being funded at the same level they were funded in FY13. This is a table listing our capital improvement projects that the committee identified during our October 2012 meeting, and they're all included in the proposed budget. We've gone through all these before, but I just wanted to highlight a few of the projects on the list. First, in the top slot, the Las Positas Valley Restoration Project. This project will include restoration of a significant portion of Las Positas Creek, which is downstream of the project we completed on the municipal golf course property a couple of years ago. We're just beginning our technical studies and outreach phases for that project. Second, the stormwater treatment retrofit projects. You just received a presentation on the projects we're going forward with this summer. We plan to fund that program. This is largely money that will be used for grant matching funds going into the future as we look at different projects. We are looking to expand beyond parking lots now. We think we've kind of figured that out. We've tested a lot of different type soil, locations with different soil types, different slopes, and things like that. We'd like to try to look at some alternate or additional types of hardscape that we can use permeable surfaces on, such as alleyways or parking strips along the sides of roadways. And then Third, I wanted to mention the Laguna Creek Mission Lagoon Restoration Project. That's down here, second from the bottom. And we recently completed our technical studies for that project, and we're just beginning the process of conceptual design. Okay, I said I'd get back to the reserves. So the purpose of the Creeks Fund unappropriated reserves is to fund capital projects, grant matches, and to cover revenue shortfalls. The committee has recommended that we keep in reserve approximately enough funds to cover the cost of 2 large projects. We estimate that amount to be about $3 million. So, this year we are using some of the reserve funds, but we project that we're going to end FY13 with $4 million in reserve, and then over the next 2 years we're going to be using about $1.1 million. So we expect to end FY15 with $2.9 million. Now, that number can change if something unexpected comes up. It could go down, but it can also go up through program efficiencies or grant funding, something like that. So, but that's our forecast right now. I want to talk a little bit about grants for the current year and going into next year. FY13 was another very, very successful grant year for the Creeks Division. We received over $3 million in grants so far, which makes this the second time in the past 4 years that our grant revenues have exceeded our total Measure B revenues, and that's pretty incredible. Basically, 100% return on the Measure B funds. As always, we'll continue to actively search for all grant opportunities for public and private funds so that we can provide the greatest possible benefits to our community. We do have one application pending right now for our Lower Mission Creek Restoration Project for $500,000. This chart is sort of difficult to read, but this just shows our grant funding compared to Measure B funding for our capital improvement program only. And as you can see, so FY13 going backwards are actual numbers, and FY14 and 15 are our projected grant revenues. As you can see, in just about every year for our capital program, our grant revenues exceed the Measure B funds, the grant revenue being the green and the Measure B being blue. These numbers over here are in the millions of dollars. So you can see we've had these couple banner years in here where it looks like we spent just over $1 million in Measure B funds and $4 million in grants, for example, in FY10. And with that, I'll conclude. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cameron. Does anyone have any questions?
I just want to comment, thank you for the presentation, and once again applaud the division's efforts to bring in the grant funding. It really has made it. Yeah, I'm on. It really has made a huge difference to the overall budgets and what you guys have been able to accomplish, and it's really impressive. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions, Mr. Benson. The interest income, it looks like it's around $12,000, and you said that's a reduction. Can you tell us what the balance is on that fund, and if that's a LAIF rate, and why it's being reduced?
The interest income is forecast by the finance department, and I don't know if they use a LAIF rate or not on the balance, and it's on a balance that we carry in our capital fund as well as in our operating fund, as well as our reserve through the year. So the finance department's estimate for FY13 was $140,600. And now we're at 112. Is that what you said? I thought I heard 12,000. So it's
Well, the interest income was 12. It said.
No. Did that say that in the staff report? Because if it did, it was a typo. It should be 112.
No, you're right. 112. Sorry. Yeah.
So they're just seeing a smaller return.
Okay.
And that's been happening. We've seen that happen over the past several years now.
Yeah. Okay. And one other question, if I may. The overhead allocation went up by $180,000 year over year, 13 to fiscal year 14. That's an almost 360% increase in your overhead. You were paying $72,000 this year, and previous years, I'm guessing it was a similar number. Do you know why it was such a huge increase?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, and I didn't explain that as clearly maybe as I should have. In past years, we've been paying part of the overhead costs for the services we've been using. For example, we've been being billed for overhead costs such as insurance, facilities maintenance, and for our information services. This year, and so for other costs for services that the Creeks Division has been utilizing, for example, city attorney, city administrator, finance department, the Creeks Division has essentially been being subsidized by the general fund, which has been paying those costs. All the other enterprise funds in the city pay a share of those overhead costs. You used to be the supervisor for one of those, so you probably know that. And this, as a special fund, was not included in covering the share. So there are different formulas for those different services. For example, for human resources, you pay a fee based on the number of full-time equivalent staff you have. And so the same formulas are being applied to every division and department throughout the city. They have not been applied to the Creeks Division before, and the city administrator's recommendation was to include those costs going forward.
And there's no intent or effort to do a retroactive recovery of those funds?
No.
Good. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I was very fortunate to join you and Mr. Bullock on the Budget and Finance Subcommittee this year. So I've heard this before, and based on the presentation, the handouts, and our prior discussion, which went into a lot of detail about these things, just to gauge the weather, I would like to move that the committee recommend approval of the proposed Creeks Division budget for 2014-15 fiscal year, both to the Parks and Recreation Commission and, if successful, onto the City Council.
Second.
Can I ask a question first?
Yes, please.
Thank you. You didn't really cover it today. I don't think it was in your presentation, but regarding functions that your department carries out, like the stormwater management program for the city. So cities that don't have a Creeks department would have to fund that out of their general fund. And we're doing it here through your department. So as now everyone's billing each other for what we do, is this something that you would consider in the future, billing the city for your department's time and services to carry out the stormwater management plan?
That's a great question, and just to put that in the context of the funding guidelines, because this is something that has come up over the years with the committee, and people have asked similar questions. And one of the kind of foundational principles of the funding guidelines that were adopted early by this committee after Measure B passed and then reaffirmed by subsequent committees is that, as Mr. Bullock was saying, the Measure B funds weren't Measure B wasn't passed to create a different source of funds for stuff we're already doing or we're already required to be doing. It was to provide additional water quality and creek restoration benefits to the community. And so the stormwater management program really is creates sort of a gray area, and that's because under the Federal Clean Water Act, every jurisdiction that is the size of the city of Santa Barbara has to have that type of program. That's essentially the city's permit to discharge water from its streets and gutters and storm drains into the creeks and ocean. And so